I guess I'm on. I hope you had me shut off while we were reading all that. No? Okay. I think that thing turns off and on by itself sometimes. All right, a quick quiz. How many of you are old enough to remember having a working rotary, not rotary phone, one of those party line phones on your wall? Okay. Good. All right. Now, next question. How many of you are sitting next to someone that you know is old enough to have had one of those phones, but they didn't raise their hand? All right. I didn't really expect you to raise your hand on the second question. Could get you in trouble. Paul Dillard is one of those gentlemen who is old enough to remember that kind of phone. In fact, he's old enough to remember that he had, or his family had, one of the first telephones in his town. He remembers how bright and shiny it was, hanging there on the kitchen wall right next to the stairs that went up to the upstairs. He even remembered their first phone number, number 105. A lot easier to remember back then. He also remembered how magical it seemed. His dad was away on business, and his mom would lift him up to the telephone, and he could speak into that, and he could hear his dad, who was in another town or in another city. It was just like magic. So imagine how excited Paul was when he found out that there was a magical person. There was a magical person living inside their telephone. Her name was Information Please. I mean, it was magical. Information Please was like the Google of her day. She knew everything. If your clock stopped running, all you had to do was call Information Please, and she could give you the right time of day. If you didn't know your friend's phone number, or you needed to call someone and you didn't know the number, you called Information Please, and Information Please would give you the phone number. It was like magic. And she knew everything. One day, Dad was at work. Mom was out visiting a neighbor. And Paul was home alone. And as little boys do, he got busy. He got curious. He found Dad's tools, he found the hammer, he found a piece of wood, and he went to work. And it didn't take long before he smashed his thumb with the hammer. Now, yes, it hurt, but the real problem was that there was no one to run crying to. There was no one to bawl to, no one to hear his cries. Mom wasn't there, Dad wasn't there. Who was going to listen to him cry? Who was going to hear it? And then he remembered the magical person who lived in the telephone. Information, please. He ran up the stairs. He was down in the basement. He ran up the stairs to the kitchen. He got the chair from the kitchen table, dragged it across the kitchen. He got up on the chair. He rang the phone. Information, please. There was a click. And then the voice came through. Information. I smashed my finger. I smashed my thumb with a hammer. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. It hurts. Are you bleeding? No, I'm not bleeding. Do you know where the ice box is? Yes. Do you know how to open the ice box and get into the ice box? Yes. Well, do you think you could get in there and get a small piece of ice and put it on your thumb? Be careful with the ice pick. Careful with the ice pick. They didn't have automatic ice makers back then. Be careful with that ice pick. But just get a little piece of ice, put it on it, you'll feel better. And that's what Paul did. And he felt better. And after that, Paul and Operation Information Please were best of friends. And they stayed in touch for a long time. If Mom and Dad were gone and he had a question, whether it be math, or spelling, or just life in general, he would call his friend Information Please. And she always had the answer. Even about difficult questions. Like the time when Paul's pet canary died. It was a beautiful bird, could sing like an angel. Why did it have to die? He didn't understand. So he called Information Please, and he explained the situation to her. She told him that it was her belief that there were other worlds. That there were other worlds, and we go there to see. And that made sense to Paul. That there were other places and other worlds that we go to sing in. That made sense. Well, Paul grew up. His phone calls to Information Please got fewer and fewer. One day he went off to college, went off to university, but he was back on vacation, back in town. He was at the airport. He just got off the phone with his sister, who had finally grown up a little. And then he thought, could it be, do you think Information Please would still be there? So he hurried up and he dialed the number for information in his hometown. And there was that familiar click, and then the voice. And it was that same old voice. Information. And Paul really hadn't expected her to pick up, hadn't expected her to answer. He really didn't know what to say. And the first thing that came to his mind was, could you tell me how to spell the word fix? There was a pause on the other end. And finally, the lady responded, I would think that thumb of yours would feel better by now. They laughed. They talked. Pretty soon Paul said, I don't think you know how important you were, how much you meant to me all those years ago. To know that you were always there. There was a brief pause again, and the lady on the other side said, I don't think you know how important you were to me, how much your phone calls meant to me. I never had any children of my own, and I really looked forward to your calls, and it really made a difference in my life, too. They talked, they shared. Pretty soon it was time for Paul to go. But before they said goodbye, Paul said, would it be okay if I called you again sometime? And Information Please said, yes, that would be fine. But next time you might want to ask for Sally. 3 months went by. He was back in town, and he decided to call his old friend up. He dialed the information number. It was a click. But it was a different voice on the other side. And he said, I'm sorry, my name is Paul Villard, and I'm looking for Sally. Well, I'm sorry, Sally is no longer with us. Oh, is there any way I can get a hold of her? I'm sorry, are you a close friend or something? Yes, my name again is Paul Villard. I've known her for years. Paul Villard, did you say? Yes. Hang on a second. Sally left a note for you. Let me go get it. And she went and she came back and she said, this is a note that she left for you. If Paul Villard calls, tell him this. I still believe that there are other worlds where we go to sing. He'll understand. Paul understood it. He talked with the operator for a few more minutes. Sally had been sick for a number of years, and she had just passed away 5 weeks before. Paul understood it. He understood. The psalmist writes, I lift my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? Where does your help come from? If you had asked little Paul when he was a child, he would have said, my help comes from that telephone. That magical lady named Information Please in that telephone. Because she was always there for him and always had the answers. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just doing what his parents did. If they had a question or a problem, they called Information Please. The psalmist was doing much the same thing. There's a lot, among scholarly circles, there's quite an argument about who wrote this psalm and for what reason they wrote the psalm, this particular one. There is a good body of evidence, and one of the stronger arguments is that this was a pilgrim psalm. That this was written by people who were making a pilgrimage to the holy city of Jerusalem and to the temple, because that's where God was. That's where God was. In the temple, in Jerusalem. And if you remember your geography from Sunday school or Vacation Bible School or wherever you studied geography, do you remember where Jerusalem is? Jerusalem is in the hills. It's up in the mountains. That's why the psalmist writes, I lift my eyes to the hills. I lift my eyes up. No matter which way you approach Jerusalem from, and by the way, the temple is in the highest place in Jerusalem, no matter which way you approach from, you are going up. You have to look up, both literally and figuratively, to approach God in Jerusalem. I lift my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? But traveling in those days was quite dangerous. It wasn't an easy thing to trek to Jerusalem. They didn't pave the roads and make a gentle grade with tarred roads that you could travel easily on. You had to be careful as you traveled up the hills and down the hills, and you had to be very careful where you put your foot. You might step in a hole and break your leg, or fall to the bottom of the hill, and even worse. It could be quite dangerous where you put your foot. So it was such a joy and such a blessing to be able to sing a song on the pilgrim trek, on the pilgrim journey, to sing this song, to have these words in your heart and in your mind about how God would watch your every step. That God was watching over you and guiding your steps so that you wouldn't lose your footing, so that you wouldn't slip and fall. What a tremendous joy and tremendous blessing that you had a God that would keep you on every step of your journey. But it's more than that. It's more than that. Because this journey, this trek, this pilgrimage to the holy city, to Jerusalem, to the temple, was often through desert areas. They weren't worried about a little sunburn. They were worried about the sun killing them. The sun could be deadly, the heat of the desert. So what a blessing. What a joy to be able to sing a song, to say the words of a psalm, about a God who would shade them as they traveled and as they journeyed. That God would protect them from the heat. God would give them shade. It makes sense when you think about it from a desert dwelling people. Shade was very important, and God would shade them. Well, what about that little line in there about moonlight? Well, to ancient, that God would protect them even from the moonlight. That sounds really kind of odd to us. But to ancient peoples, moonlight was dangerous. It was scary. And we don't have to look very far to understand kind of what they were thinking. Our own English language. The word lunatic. Luna. How many of you remember your Latin roots? Luna means moon in Latin. Lunatic, touched by the moon, made crazy by the moonlight. This was how ancient peoples viewed the moonlight. It was dangerous. It was scary. What a blessing, what a joy it was to have a hymn, to have a song that they could sing along the way, that God would protect them, not just where they put their foot, not just from the sun during the day, but from the moonlight at night as well. God was always there. God would always protect them and be there for them every step of every going in and every going out. Not just on this pilgrimage, not just on this journey, but on every journey, every going in and every going out of their entire lives forever. That was the God that they believed in. And we are on a journey as well. We too are on a journey, especially during this time of Lent. We talk about this being a journey to the cross. 40 days we are on this journey. It's a long one. 40 days, not counting Sundays. It's a long journey. But life is longer. Life, the journey of life is longer. Isn't it a joy? Isn't it a blessing to know that there is a God that keeps you? As you go through Lent and take your steps towards the cross, isn't it a blessing? Isn't it a joy to know that there is a God who keeps your every step, that will not let you fall, that God is there? And if you do fall, He'll pick you up. Isn't it a blessing? Isn't it a joy to know that there is a God that will give you shade? Because sometimes as we go through Lent, it can get pretty scary as we start reflecting upon our lives. As we start shining light upon our lives and how we have lived them in the past year, it can start to burn. It can start to hurt as we start to realize how far we have gone astray. Isn't it a joy and isn't it a blessing to know that there is a God that gives you shade? That there is a God who will give you protection and shield you from that reflection. That there is a God there who will forgive you and not hold all your sins against you. Isn't it a joy? Isn't it a blessing? Isn't it a wonder to know that there is a God who is there to protect you from becoming moonstruck? Because as we go too far this way, we can also go too far the other way. Look at me. Look at all I have given up. Look at all that I am doing. How wonderful and how great I am. As we travel through Lent, we can easily get caught up into all of this that I'm giving up, about all of that. Please look at me. we can become moonstruck. A little bit touched by the moon. Isn't it a wonder? Isn't it a joy? Isn't it a blessing to know that there is a God that will keep you from that as well? And who will forgive you? And who will bring you back? But we have to be careful here. We have to be careful not to imply, not to say, that God will never let bad things happen to you. We know that's not true. You've all experienced it. You've all been there. Bad things do happen to good people. You know that. That's not what the psalmist is saying. What the psalmist is saying is God is there. Isn't it a joy? Isn't it a blessing? Isn't it a wonder that God keeps you? That when you smash your thumb with that hammer, that you can run up those stairs into the kitchen, get that kitchen chair and drag it across the floor, climb up on the chair and dial up. God, information, please. Because God is always there. God's information, please, is always available. God is always there for you and will never leave you. Isn't it a wonder? Isn't it a joy? Isn't it a blessing to know that God keeps you? From whence does your help come? Where does your help come from? Lift your eyes to the hills. Lift your eyes to the cross. Your help comes from the Lord. And God bless you and keep you every step of the way.